Let's take 3 more questions.
This is related to healthcare. If we had, sorry, I've always thought that if we had universal healthcare for people in the lower end of the income scales who often stay in jobs that may not be the best jobs because of the benefits of healthcare, if they still exist, that is. Do you feel that universal healthcare will help empower those people in the employer-employed relation to have some ability to seek out better jobs if they're not tied to an employer for their health?
Yeah, I think, well, I think about the whole healthcare situation, and I'm a nicely paid professor at an elite university, so most of the people I know are in pretty good shape, and yet I know reasonably well at least a dozen people who are either uninsured, fear being uninsured, or are stuck in jobs they hate because of fear of losing insurance. And this is just pervasive throughout America, and would make a huge difference. It would allow people to be more flexible. It would allow more entrepreneurship. One of the reasons people are afraid to set out on their own and start something new is because, working for a big established company, at least you have a health plan. No, these are, we think we invented entrepreneurship in this country. There's the never verified quote from Bush that he's supposed to have said. The French don't even have a word for entrepreneur. It's apocryphal, but it is great. I look right now, and in many ways, you can see that there's a lot of creativity going on in some of the European economies now, in Japan, surprisingly. And at least part of what makes it possible is healthcare. No, there's a lot of freedom that comes from knowing that should the worst happen, there will be a safety net.
I keep hoping for a realignment of the parties, and so I'm wondering if the Southern white men you speak of are prospering so greatly that they'll never come around, or do you believe that they will rejoin the more liberal point of view of the rest of the country at some point?
Okay. I'm not sure that they will, but there aren't that many of them when all is said and done. There are a lot of. It's weird, actually, how much the American political class thinks that you need to cater to the opinions of groups that are diminishing minorities. Southern white men are a smaller part of the electorate than I think. I don't know if it's true, but they're certainly not wildly larger than unmarried women. Why shouldn't that be an equally important group? Someone recently pointed out where we still talk about the farmers. We really have to worry about the farmers, and by all means, you should worry about them because they're Americans. But the idea that they are a especially important part of the political scene, and apparently, according to the latest numbers, there are in America now more World of Warcraft players than there are farmers. So, no, I shouldn't recommend other people's books. My publisher will get mad. But it's a very excellent book by a political scientist named Tom Schaller at the University of Maryland called Whistling Past Dixie, which is an analysis on a lot of it. It shows up in my book from him. But basically, the argument of the Democrats: look, you're not going to get that Southern white vote for quite a while, but you can win without it, so you don't need to do that. Last point, if you actually look at lower income Southern whites, actually are not very different from lower income whites in the rest of the country. It's actually the middle and upper income Southern whites that are very, very conservative. So I'm probably not allowed to say this, but the problem really is not poor white trash, it's rich white trash.
There's one more question.
You dangled the bauble in front of us a little while ago that you might
might know who really Ronald Reagan was.
Oh,
Could you tell us?
yeah, let me tell you, this is actually, who was Ronald? So Ronald Reagan, the real Ronald Reagan, you know, he is, I mean, everybody now, it's a running joke, St. Ronald, been reinvented as this wonderful icon of pure conservatism and nothing like the current occupant of the White House. The reality is that certainly up until he got to the White House, actually Reagan in the White House was not quite as bad as you might have feared, but his political career and the way he led the movement is remarkably ugly. So you want to look, there was a 1964 speech, Time for Choosing, he made for Barry Goldwater that made him a national figure. It's actually David Broder of the Washington Post called it the most influential political speech since William Jennings Bryan's Cross of Gold speech. And you can read it, and it is astonishingly mean-spirited. So he makes fun of John F. Kennedy for saying that millions of Americans go to bed hungry each night, and Reagan says, well, they were probably all on a diet. It's got a proto-version of the welfare queen story, which later on, in the 1970s, Reagan was best known for going around talking about the welfare queen driving her Cadillac, which was, of course, made up. And he never said what color she was, but he didn't have to, right? 1980, Ronald Reagan began his presidential campaign, not with a speech on tax cuts, not with a speech on fighting communism, but by going to Philadelphia, Mississippi, where the civil rights workers had been murdered, and giving a speech and saying, I believe in states' rights. So his career was very largely based on tacit race baiting, and a fair bit of red baiting as well. But Reagan was the man who mastered the ability to use race in politics without actually saying the words. And there's so it's an ugly story. It was not uplifting at all. He was, and actually in office, part of the reason his administration wasn't as bad as might have been, although we've swept a lot of stuff like Iran-Contra under the rug as well, is that he had Democratic Congress. People forget that he tried very early on to cut Social Security. He just got pushed back so hard, so fast, that it vanished down the memory hole. But the way I like to say it actually is that in the end, all the conservatives now say, oh, well, Bush wasn't really, in all the respects that matter, George W. Bush is Ronald Reagan's natural son.
I want to thank